My mom chose my abusive stepdad over me, even after he hit me. I moved out and gathered evidence against him. That was 3 months ago. Today, he's in jail, and she's begging me to come back. Look, I never thought I'd be writing this story on here, but man, life has a way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect them. 3 months ago, I was living in what I thought was a normal family situation. Sure, my stepdad Rick was kind of a jerk, but I figured that was just typical step-parent drama, you know? Boy, was I wrong. Rick came into our lives when I was 14. Mom had been single for a couple years after my dad bounced when I was 12. Classic deadbeat dad story. At first, Rick seemed decent enough. He drove a nice Chevy Silverado, had a steady job at the local Ford dealership, and always brought Mom flowers on Fridays. He'd crack open a Bud Light after work and watch ESPN like any regular dude. Mom was happy, and honestly, that's all I cared about back then. The red flags started small. Rick would make these little comments about my grades, my friends, the way I dressed. Nothing too crazy, just enough to make me feel like I was walking on eggshells. When I'd complain to Mom, she'd brush it off with that whole, he's just trying to be a good father figure routine. Classic, right? Things escalated when I turned 16. I got my license and wanted to borrow Mom's Honda Civic to hang out with my friends at the mall. Rick flipped out, saying I was too irresponsible, that I'd probably crash the car or get into trouble. When I tried to argue, respectfully mind you, he got in my face and started yelling about respect and how kids these days don't know their place. Mom just stood there, didn't say a word. That's when I started noticing the pattern. Every argument, every disagreement, every time Rick got aggressive with his words, Mom would side with him or stay silent. It was like she'd completely forgotten she had a daughter who needed her support. The physical stuff started about 6 months ago. Rick had been drinking more than usual, not just his typical weekend Bud Light sessions, but like serious drinking. He'd come home from the dealership already buzzed and get progressively worse throughout the evening. One night, I accidentally left my backpack on the kitchen counter. Rick stumbled in, saw it, and went ballistic. How many times do I have to tell you to keep your junk out of my kitchen? He slurred, grabbing my backpack and throwing it across the room. My laptop was in there, the one I'd saved up for months to buy with my part-time job at Target. Hey, careful with that, I said, rushing to check if my laptop was okay. That's my stuff. That's when he shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward and hit the kitchen island, bruising my hip pretty badly. The whole thing happened so fast, I was more shocked than anything else. Mom walked in, right as I was getting up, saw me rubbing my hip, saw Rick standing there with his fists clenched. What happened? She asked, but her voice was already defensive, like she was preparing to take his side. Your daughter needs to learn some respect, Rick said, not even trying to hide what had just happened. Maybe if you disciplined her properly, I wouldn't have to. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to say something, anything, waiting for her to ask if I was okay, to tell Rick he was out of line, to be my mom for once. Instead, she turned to me and said, just keep your things in your room from now on, okay? I couldn't believe it. My own mother was basically telling me it was my fault that her husband had put his hands on me. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support in the comments. Some of you are asking if I told anyone else about what was happening. At the time, I was honestly too embarrassed and confused. When your own mom doesn't have your back, you start questioning if maybe you really are the problem, you know? But reading your responses is giving me strength to continue this story. What would you have done in my situation if you were 17 and felt completely alone? The incidents kept escalating. Rick would accidentally bump into me in the hallway, hard enough to knock me off balance. He'd grip my shoulder too tightly when talking to me, leaving bruises I had to cover with long sleeves. Once, he threw a TV remote at me because I changed the channel during halftime of a basketball game. Every single time, Mom had an excuse. He's just stressed about work. You know how he gets when the Lakers are playing? Maybe you shouldn't antagonize him. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in February. I'd been accepted to the state university and got a partial scholarship, something I was incredibly proud of. I was showing Mom the acceptance letter when Rick came home, already 3 sheets to the wind. What's all the excitement about? He asked, swaying slightly as he hung up his keys. She got into state, Mom said, and for a moment I thought I heard pride in her voice. Rick snatched the letter from my hands and squinted at it. Partial scholarship, huh? So we're still on the hook for what, 15 grand a year? That's real nice, real convenient. It's a good school, I said quietly, and I'll get a job to help pay for... You'll get a job? Rick laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You can barely handle your shifts at Target without complaining. You think you're gonna juggle college and work? You're living in a fantasy land, kid. That stung, but I tried to stay calm. I've been working at Target for over a year. My manager says I'm one of their most reliable employees. Don't talk back. To me? Rick snapped, taking a step closer. I could smell the beer on his breath, mixed with something stronger. You think you're so smart with your little scholarship? You think you're better than us? I never said that, I protested. But Rick was already winding up for one of his rants. Your attitude is the problem here. You walk around this house like you're something special, like we owe you something. Well, let me tell you something, princess. The world doesn't revolve around you. He was getting closer with each word, and I could see that familiar anger building in his eyes. I glanced at Mom, silently pleading for her to intervene. She was looking at her phone. Rick, maybe we should celebrate, she said absently, not even looking up. This is good news. Celebrate? Rick wheeled around to face her. Celebrate that. We're gonna be broke for the next 4 years so Princess here can party at college? That's not fair, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I worked hard for this scholarship, and I never asked you to pay for anything. Rick spun back toward me, and I saw his hand coming before I could react. The slap echoed through the kitchen, sharp and sudden. My cheek burned, and I could taste blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom finally looked up from her phone. She saw me holding my cheek, saw Rick standing there with his hand still raised, saw everything she needed to see. Rick, she said softly. Maybe you should go sleep it off. That's it. That's all she said. No, are you okay? No, don't ever touch my daughter again. Just a gentle suggestion that her husband go take a nap after slapping her kid across the face. Rick stumbled off to their bedroom, muttering under his breath about ungrateful teenagers and how things were different when he was growing up. I stood there in the kitchen, tasting blood, waiting for Mom to say something, anything that would show me she still cared about me. She picked up her phone again. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't live like this anymore, and if Mom wasn't going to protect me, I'd have to protect myself. I started researching my options, looking up information about teen shelters, emancipation laws, anything that could get me out of that house safely. But first, I needed evidence. I started documenting everything. Every bruise, every threat, every incident. I used my phone to take pictures of marks Rick left on me. I started voice recording conversations when things got heated, keeping my phone in my pocket with the recorder app running. I wrote down dates, times, witnesses, though witnesses were usually just Mom, and we all know how helpful she was. The hardest part was acting normal while gathering evidence. I had to pretend everything was fine at school, at work, even with my friends. A couple of times, my best friend Sarah asked about bruises she'd seen, but I always had excuses ready. Walked into a door. Fell off my bike. Clumsy me, you know? I was getting pretty good at covering up, both literally and figuratively. The evidence collection went on for about 3 weeks. In that time, Rick hit me twice more, once for slamming a door. I'd closed it normally. He was just looking for a reason, and once because I'd eaten the last of some leftover pizza he'd been saving. Each time I documented everything. Each time Mom found a way to make it my fault or just pretended it hadn't happened. I was also secretly reaching out to my dad. I know. He'd been out of the picture for years, and part of me hated myself for even considering it. But I was desperate, and despite everything, he was still my father. Turns out, he'd been trying to stay in touch over the years, but Mom had been intercepting his calls and letters. When I finally got through, to him on a number I found online, he was shocked to hear what was happening. Why didn't you call me sooner? He asked, and I could hear genuine concern in his voice. Mom always said you didn't want anything to do with me, I admitted. There was a long pause. That's not true. That was never true. I've been sending child support this whole time, and I've called dozens of times. She always said you didn't want to talk to me. Another lie from Mom. Another betrayal. Dad lived about 2 hours away in a different state, but he immediately offered to help. He couldn't just come get me without going through proper legal channels. That would be kidnapping, technically. But he could provide support and a safe place to stay if I could get myself out legally. Update. Wow, the response to this story has been incredible. A lot of you are sharing your own experiences, and it's both heartbreaking and comforting to know I wasn't alone. Some people are asking why I didn't just call the police immediately. Looking back, I probably should have, but when you're in that situation, especially as a teenager, it's not always that simple. You doubt yourself, you worry about making things worse, and when your own parent doesn't support you, it messes with your head big time. But I promise the story gets better from here. What's the bravest thing you've ever had to do when no one was on your side? The final straw came on a Friday night in March. Rick had been laid off from the dealership earlier that week. Apparently sales were down and they were cutting staff. He'd been drinking steadily since Tuesday, barely leaving the couch except to grab more beer from the fridge. I was in my room doing homework when I heard him yelling at Mom about money. Something about the mortgage payment being late, bills piling up, how everything was falling apart. I tried to tune it out and focus on my calculus problems, but the shouting kept getting louder. Then I heard Mom crying. I crept to my door and listened. Rick was going off about how Mom needed to ask her sister for money, how they should take out a loan against the house, how maybe I should forget about college and get a full-time job to help support the family. She's just a kid, Rick, Mom said, through her tears. She deserves a chance at college. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Mom was finally standing up for me. A chance. Rick's voice was getting angrier. What about my chances? What about what I deserve? I've been busting my rear end to support this family. And for what? So your spoiled brat can go play college. Girl, while I'm out here struggling? I heard footsteps, then the sound of something being thrown against the wall. She's not spoiled, Mom said, but her voice was small, defeated. The hell she isn't. Walking around here like she's too good for us with her fancy scholarship and her attitude. You know what she needs? She needs to learn some respect. I heard Rick's heavy footsteps coming down the hallway toward my room. I quickly got up and locked my door, heart pounding. I'd never locked my door before, but something about the way Rick was talking, the anger in his voice, made me feel like I was in real danger. The footsteps stopped outside my door. The handle turned, but the lock held. "Open this door," Rick said, his voice low and threatening. "I'm doing homework," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I said open this door, now. I could hear Mom in the background saying something I couldn't make out, then Rick again, louder. "Don't make me break this door down." I grabbed my phone and started recording. If he was going to threaten me, I wanted it documented. "I'm not doing anything wrong," I said, loud enough for the phone to pick up. "I'm just in my room studying." "Your attitude is what's wrong," Rick shouted. "You think you can just lock yourself away when I want to talk to you? You think you're in charge here?" He started pounding on the door, hard. The whole frame was shaking. "Rick, please," I heard Mom say. "Just leave her alone. She's not bothering anyone." "She's bothering me by existing," Rick snarled. "Ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for this family." The pounding got harder. I was genuinely afraid he was going to break the door down. That's when I made the call. I dialed 911, whispering into the phone while Rick continued his assault on my door. 911, what's your emergency?" "My stepdad is trying to break down my door," I whispered. "He's been drinking and he's threatening me. I'm scared." "What's your address, honey?" I gave them our address, still whispering, still recording on my other phone. "Are you hurt right now?" the operator asked. "Not yet, but he's hit me before. I have pictures. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Is there anywhere safe you can go in the house?" Before I could answer, the pounding stopped. I heard voices in the hallway, Mom and Rick arguing in hushed tones, then footsteps going back toward the living room. "I think he's walking away," I told the operator. "The officers should be there in about 3 minutes. Don't hang up." When the police arrived, Rick was back on the couch with a beer, acting like nothing had happened. Mom answered the door, and I heard her talking to the officers in the living room. "There must be some misunderstanding," she was saying. "Everything's fine here. Kids, you know how they are. Sometimes they overreact." I came out of my room with both phones in hand, one still connected to 911, the other with the recording I'd just made. The 2 officers, a woman who looked to be in her 30s and an older guy, looked at me with concern. I probably looked as scared as I felt. "You're the one who called?" the female officer asked gently. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "He was trying to break down my door. I have it recorded." Rick jumped up from the couch. "That's ridiculous. I was just trying to talk to her about her attitude problem." "By threatening to break down her door?" the male officer asked. "I never threatened anything," Rick said, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I played the recording for the officers. Rick's voice came through clearly. "Don't make me break this door down." The pounding, his comment about me, bothering him by existing. The officers looked at each other, then at Mom, who was standing there looking completely lost. "Ma'am," the female officer said to Mom, "we need to ask, has there been any physical violence in this home?" Mom glanced at Rick, then at me, then back at the officer. I could see her weighing her options, trying to figure out what to say. "Tell them about the times he hit me," I said quietly. "Tell them about the bruises. Tell them about the threats." "She's exaggerating," Mom said quickly. "Rick would never seriously hurt anyone. He's not a violent person." I couldn't believe it, even with the police standing right there, even with recorded evidence of Rick threatening me. Mom was still taking his side. The officers asked to speak with me privately, so we went out to their squad car. That's when I showed them the photos on my phone, pictures of bruises, recordings of previous incidents, dates, and times I'd documented over the past few weeks. "How long has this been going on?" the female officer asked. "About 6 months," I said, "but it's been getting worse." "And your mother? Has she witnessed any of this?" "She's witnessed all of it. I couldn't finish the sentence. "How do you explain that your own mother chooses your abuser over you?" The officers went back inside and talked to Rick and Mom for about 20 minutes. I sat in the squad car, watching through the window as Rick gestured angrily, and Mom nodded along with whatever he was saying. When the officers came back out, they looked grim. "We're arresting him for domestic violence and making terroristic threats," the female officer said. "The recording you made tonight, combined with the evidence you've been collecting, gives us enough for charges." I watched through the car window as they handcuffed Rick. He was shouting something about it being a misunderstanding, how I was just a dramatic teenager looking for attention. Mom was crying, begging the officers to reconsider. She never once asked if I was okay. The officers asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I called my dad, and he immediately said he'd drive down to get me. While we waited, one of the officers helped me pack a bag of essentials. Mom tried to talk to me before I left. "This is all going to blow over," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Rick's not a bad man. He's just been under a lot of stress with losing his job. You'll see. Once things calm down, we can all be a family again." I stared at her. This woman who had given birth to me, raised me, was supposed to protect me. "He hit me, Mom," I said simply. "Multiple times. And you did nothing." "I was trying to keep the peace," she protested. "I was trying to hold our family together." "What family?" I asked. "You chose him over me every single time. That's not a family." When Dad arrived, he looked older than I remembered, but his hug felt like coming home. We didn't talk much on the drive to his place. There would be time for all of that later. For now, it was enough to be safe, to be with someone who actually cared about my well-being. Rick was charged with domestic violence, assault, and making terroristic threats. With all the evidence I'd gathered plus the recording from that final night, his lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. He got 18 months in county jail and a restraining order that keeps him away from me. Update. This is probably my final update, and I want to thank everyone who has been following this story and offering support. Your messages have meant more to me than you know. A lot of you are asking about my relationship with my mom now, 3 months later. It's complicated, but I think you'll understand when you read what happened next. For those of you who have been through similar situations, how did you rebuild trust with family members who let you down? Is it even possible? The calls from Mom started about a week after Rick was sentenced. At first, I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to deal with her guilt trips or her attempts to minimize what had happened, but she kept calling, leaving voicemails that got more desperate each time. "Please call me back," she'd say. "I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I miss you so much." After about 2 weeks of constant calls, I finally answered. "I'm sorry," were the first words out of her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have believed you. I should have chosen you." It was what I'd been waiting to hear for months, but somehow it felt hollow. Too little, too late. "Why didn't you?" I asked. "Why did you let him treat me like that?" There was a long pause. "I was scared," she finally admitted. "I was scared of being alone again. After your father left, I thought I'd never find anyone else, and when Rick came along, I guess I was willing to overlook things I shouldn't have overlooked." "He abused your daughter," I said. "How do you overlook that?" "I told myself it wasn't that serious," she said, crying now. "I told myself you were being dramatic, that it was just normal step-parent-stepchild conflict. I know how stupid that sounds now, but I was so afraid of losing him that I convinced myself." She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. She'd convinced herself that my safety was worth sacrificing to keep her relationship intact. "The house feels so empty without you," she continued, "and without Rick. I know he did terrible things. I know that now, but I'm all alone and I don't know how to handle it." Part of me felt sorry for her, but a bigger part of me was still angry. "You made your choice," I told her. "You chose him over me, repeatedly. Now you have to live with the consequences." "Can't we try to rebuild?" she asked. "Can't you come home so we can work through this together?" "That house stopped being my home the first time he hit me, and you did nothing," I said. "I'm not coming back." The calls kept coming, but they changed over time. Mom started going to therapy, which was good. She also started Al-Anon meetings, saying she was learning about how living with an alcoholic had affected her judgment and decision-making. She sent me articles about children of abuse, about trauma, about healing. It was progress, but it was her progress, not ours. 3 months later, which brings us to now, Mom called with different news. "I'm selling the house," she said. "I can't afford the mortgage on my own, and honestly, there are too many bad memories here." "Okay," I said. I wasn't sure why she was telling me this. "I found a smaller place closer to where you're living with your dad," she continued. "I was hoping maybe we could start over. Not living together, but maybe we could try to rebuild our relationship." I'd been thinking about this conversation for months. In therapy, yeah, I'm in therapy now too, and it's helping. I'd been working through my feelings about Mom, about what she'd done, and what it meant for our future relationship. Here's what. I'd figured out I could forgive her eventually, but I couldn't forget. And I definitely couldn't go back to the way things were before. "If you want to try to rebuild our relationship," I told her, "there have to be boundaries." "Anything," she said quickly. "Whatever you need. First, you have to accept full responsibility for what happened. No more excuses about being scared or trying to keep the peace. You failed to protect me, and that's on you." "I accept that," she said. "Completely." "Second, if you ever get involved with someone new, I have veto power. If I don't feel safe around them, if I see any red flags, you listen to me, no questions asked. Of course. Third, we take this slow. Maybe coffee once a month to start. Maybe a phone call every couple weeks. I'm not ready for holidays or family dinners or pretending everything is fine. I understand." "And fourth," I said, taking a deep breath, "you have to understand that I may never fully trust you again. What you did, choosing him over me, that broke something between us. I'm willing to try to rebuild, but it's going to be different." "I'm different." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I know," she finally said. "I know I broke your trust. I know I failed you as a mother. If you're willing to give me a chance to try to make it right, even a small chance, I'll take it." So that's where we are now. Mom moved to her new apartment last week. We're having coffee this Saturday. Just coffee, just an hour, just a first step. Rick is still in jail and will be for another year. He's tried to contact me a few times through other people, claiming he wants to apologize, but I have no interest in hearing from him. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, and some apologies aren't worth accepting. Dad and I are doing great. He's been everything I needed him to be, supportive without being overbearing, angry at the situation without taking it out on me, committed to helping me heal without trying to rush the process. We're planning a trip to visit colleges this summer. I deferred enrollment for a year to get my head straight, and honestly, it was the right call. I know some of you are going to ask if I think I made the right choice in giving Mom another chance. The truth is, I don't know yet. But I know I made the right choice in leaving when I did, in documenting what was happening, in refusing to accept abuse as normal. I also know that I'm stronger than I thought I was. 3 months ago, I was a scared kid living in an unsafe situation, too confused and manipulated to know how to help myself. Now I'm living with a parent who actually cares about my well-being. I'm getting help processing what happened, and I'm setting healthy boundaries with the people in my life. It's not the family story I would have written for myself, but it's mine, and I'm finally okay with that. For anyone out there dealing with something similar, whether it's abuse, neglect, or just family members who don't have your best interests at heart, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be safe, to be believed, to be protected by the people who are supposed to love you. And if those people fail you, like they failed me, you have the strength to protect yourself. It might not feel like it in the moment, but you do. Don't let anyone convince you that abuse is normal, that you're overreacting, or that keeping the peace is more important than your safety. Trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You're worth fighting for, even if you have to do the fighting yourself. Thanks for reading, and thanks for all the support. It means more than you know.